Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Around the Ballpark podcast. My name is Mike Redman. It is Sunday night, November the 3rd, and we are here to talk a little bit Major League Baseball, a lot about the Chicago White Sox, summarizing the 2024 season in review. So with that said, I want to introduce who is here with us. Our co-host tonight, our guest co-host, we've had him on early on. His name is Tony Boda, the At Baseball Road Tripper. Thank you so much for subbing in this evening for this chat. And our guest of honor is Christopher Gabriel, lifelong Chicago White Sox fan. We're going to get to know him a little bit more on who he is and what he does and all sorts of things like that. But again, thank you all for joining us here in the chat as you start jumping on here. Like we mentioned, we're still kind of new to this live thing, and your support has been awesome. Just want to say shout out for that. I think back to April, Tony, when we had you on as a recording, and I think we had just under 50 subscribers, and now we're a couple subscribers away from 1,300 just in a short amount of time. So that is awesome. So that's a tribute to all of you guys watching this either now or if you jump on later on. So again, just wanted to say thank you. So before we dive in and get to have a lot of fun tonight, we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Nashville Tax Solutions. Big partner of our show since day one. They believed in us, and so we just want to show our gratitude. And so Nashville Tax Solutions, you might ask who they are. Well, in the heart of Palm Bay, Florida, where the ocean meets the sky, there's a place where tax worries meet their end. Whether you need to file years of missing returns, a current year return, or you need relief from a tax lien or levy, Nashville Tax Solutions has the solution for you. Introducing Nashville Tax Solutions, your trusted partner in the tax resolution industry, where we understand the stress and confusion that tax problems can bring. That's why we're here to offer clarity, relief, and peace of mind. Our expert team of tax professionals are dedicated to providing personalized solutions tailored to your unique situation. Nashville Tax Solutions saved me from a financial nightmare. They're not just tax experts in the tax resolution, they're compassionate too. Do not let tax problems weigh you down. Contact Nashville Tax Solutions today and let them guide you towards a brighter financial future. Call Nashville Tax Solutions 615-502-2250. Check out their website, nashvilletaxsolutions.com, or send an email to info@nashvilletaxsolutions.com, where tax resolution is achieved. And that was all from memory, complete memory. Awesome. Yeah. So, but thank you guys. There's a few in the chat that are here with us. Thank you. I know a few more will be popping on. So again, first, thank you, Tony, for jumping on and co-hosting tonight. Darren was unavailable. He should be back with us next week. So looking forward to that. But in the meantime, we have our guest of honor, as we mentioned, Christopher Gabriel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. I heard you say Nashville Tax Solution, where the ocean meets the sky. We're going to talk about the White Sox later, and really their motto might as well have been where the blowtorch meets the dumpster this year.
There we go. Yeah, that's
what that is. It was the forgotten summer for me. Let me tell you.
Yep. The year got away from them pretty quickly. But yeah. So first and foremost, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with the audience who you are, what you do, where you're from, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm the hat that Tony's wearing. I'm from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago. I'm in radio. I'm a 20-year radio talk show host. Started in Minneapolis. Started really at the bottom. I mean, it was the best place to start. I was a call screener for this legendary political reporter named Pat Kessler. And
yes,
I did Pat's show, and then one thing led to another. And what Pat was a big theater guy, and I came from a theater background before radio, and Pat wanted to do the Henry V, the Crispin Crispian speech. And midway on air, and I never said a word, I was just screening calls. He lost the line from where he was at in the speech. So just instinctually, I jumped on and finished it. During the break, Pat goes, and the talkback said, "What the bleep was that?" And I thought, I just ruined my whole career. And I said, I'm so sorry. And he goes, no, because you need to do more of that. And from that moment on, I started to write sort of bits and commercials and characters, and he incorporated me on the show. And I worked my way up from call screener to associate producer to producer. And then Andrew Zimmern from Bizarre Foods came aboard, and he needed a co-host and a producer on weekends, and they wanted for somebody for his co-host or for his fill-in host. They had talked about Rachel Ray. They had talked about Bobby Flay. He had been hearing my work, and I was just really blessed. It being in the newsroom, suddenly I see him across the room going, "That's the guy that I want." He was pointing at me, so I got hooked up with Andrew Zimmern. I was really fortunate to have great people like Andrew, like Pat Kessler, and then the guy that really taught me radio, Dan Barrero from KFAN in Minneapolis. And so eventually I got my first job in Fargo. This is probably gone. I feel like this story is going on till Christmas at this point. But
we're here for it, though. We're here for it. Yeah.
I spent 6 years, 6 great years in Fargo. Wonderful, wonderful town, a couple 100,000 people. And the great thing about being in Market 200 is that you do everything, you learn everything. And I mean everything from every aspect of producing a radio program, doing a radio show as a host, to shoveling snow in Fargo in front of the broadcast center. So I did that for 6 years. I got brought out to California. Fast forward to a couple of years ago, I spent 4 years as the afternoon drive host at ESPN Fresno. I was also the 2-hour host of Game Day Live, the 2-hour pregame show for Fresno State football. I did the halftime scoreboard show. I did the postgame call-in show, which was always interesting, called Bulldog Final. The only people that called in was when the Bulldogs lost. When they won, nobody wanted to say anything. When they lost, everybody had something to say. And now for the past 4 years, I'm at KMJ came calling. KMJ is a heritage station. Like WCCO and not KFA, but WCCO in Minneapolis, been around since 1922. And you know the deal. When the number one station calls, you listen. And the show that I'm on, we've been really fortunate. Every year that I've been there, except for one, we've been named the best morning radio show in Fresno. We've won a lot of awards. We're number one 6 to 9 a.m. Then I have a show on the weekend, very, very cleverly named the Christopher Gabriel program. I keep that to almost all sports. We have, all the people that I've known through my work over the years. We bring a lot of people like Adam Rittenberg and Heather Dinich on the show from ESPN. We'll bring Christine Brennan from USA Today on the program, just a whole boatload of people. And when we need to have any kind of medical stuff, we'll bring Dr. Bill Maurice, who is the CEO of Mayo Clinic Labs. So we try to mix in great guests, monologues, right down to, the upset girls state champion here in California in the lowest possible division in terms of size of school. We'll bring the coach and the stars on. So that's what I do. Love what I do. I don't love getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you know what? It's when you love what you do, you get there and you're around the people that you really enjoy being at work with. All the tiredness goes out the window.
Well, that's crazy, because I thought I was going to have to research and do all this like interjection with some of the stuff that I was going to have to learn about Chicago. But you met me here, and I'm just a fill-in host. So hearing all those Minneapolis stories and all those names, it's just like, I feel at home. So thank you, Christopher, and thank you, Mike, for inviting me on today.
You know what's interesting, Tony, is that Dan Barrero, for anybody listening, Dan is a legend. Dan is in the Broadcast Hall of Fame in Minnesota. He's absolutely a legend, 3 to 6:30 p.m., been there for 25, 30 years. And I knew that when I wanted to move from classical theater to being a radio host, and that was actually another story, that was because of Mitch Albom in Detroit. I knew that I needed to listen to and learn from the best. So when I was just an intern, we used to call me the oldest intern in radio history. I used to sneak in to one of the production studios and literally hide behind the broadcast table and put headphones on and listen to Dan every single day and take notes, just not to copy him, but just to understand the structure of what he was doing and how he does it. And so this now 5,000 plus shows later, my show is still structured after the way Dan structured his show. And Dan remains a good friend. His producer remains a good friend. I think the key to this business is you are always learning, you're always growing. And there's no better people to learn from than the ones that were there when you were really at the ground floor of the building.
That's awesome. We're going to have so much fun. We have so many things to talk about. And so, but no, thanks for sharing all that. And I'm excited to hear what you guys both have to say about this. So let's start with something that has absolutely nothing to do with the on-field. Let's talk, because as you can see, I'm wearing my OMG playoff pumpkin. I'm a New York Mets fan. Love this shirt. Wife got it for me a couple weeks ago, right in time for the postseason, which loved it. Got to wear it as often as I could. And so I have to ask, starting with you, Christopher. So let's talk food for just a moment. So I'm familiar and comfortable with the New York hot dog, right? But what is the Chicago dog experience like? Because I know it's delicious. I haven't had one myself out. I've had like one local here, but that's not the same. Anybody can call New York style or Chicago style in Florida. But what is that experience like for you firsthand?
Well, first of all, you're talking my language now because I was born and raised in a food family. My grandfather owned a famous diner in Chicago on Seminary Avenue across from DePaul University, appropriately enough called the Seminary. And I lived in a lot of years in New York City. I love New York City dogs. I don't care what's in them. The soubrette dogs with the barbecued onions and the mustard, love them. A Chicago dog is like a salad almost. It's got a poppy seed bun. It's a Vienna hot dog. You've got sport peppers. You've got bright green relish that looks like the Chicago River on St. Patrick's Day. You've got yellow mustard. Celery salt is the key. They'll throw a big tomato on there as well, a pickle spear. I personally, my pared down Chicago dog, I want the Vienna hot dog. I've had them flown out here to California. The poppy seed bun, you got to char that dog. You got to char it. Celery salt is the key. I like going mustard and chopped raw onions. Good to go. Anybody that wants ketchup here, they better bring their own.
Yes, I'm glad you said that because I've never understood ketchup on a hot dog. If you're watching and you enjoy that, still subscribe. But what are you thinking? I don't know. But
Mike, we've had a thing on my show. This is you shouldn't do this, right? Just that doesn't look good. We had a thing on my show about condiments for hot dogs, and one guy called in and said, "I really love mayo." It's like, get out. Okay, you're just done. He was done. Anybody that calls that's like going to Katz's Deli in the Lower East Side of Manhattan and asking for pastrami with mayonnaise on it. They kick you out of there.
Yeah, you can't. I remember, one time going to an upscale steakhouse and almost blurting out A1, and which would have been a disaster. So I learned my lesson with that. And thank you guys just once again. Marianne, my mother's in the chat. Hello, Mom. My wife Eileen is in there, and Brian Anderson. He's been helped co-host quite a few times. Been a guest recently with the Washington Commanders. Another big win today over the New York Giants. So. Glad to have you.
You had to mention them, didn't you? You had to mention the Washington Commanders. As a lifelong Bears fan, I've still not gotten over that travesty last week. Sorry, I didn't mean
it was happening real time while we were on the show. But what was funny about the whole situation was, so the catch alone was spectacular, but we didn't have at least I didn't have all the pieces of information until we found out that so-and-so was showboating a little bit, and then everything happened.
Mike, the only piece of information that you needed to know is that it was the Chicago Bears. There were 31 teams this could have happened to. Of course, it happened to the Bears. And I always joke on my show, Chicago Bears fans are the best. When the Bears win a preseason game, you're going to get Anthony from Cicero calling up going, I'm going to tell you what, the Chicago Bears are going to win the Super Bowl. As soon as they lose, I hate them. They're bums. I'm burning that jersey. I mean, it's that quick.
That's so true. Robert is in the chat. Hello, Robert. Welcome and joining us. Bengals fan, Robert. So glad to have you with us here. So we have to ask you next, and then I have a question for you right after Tony. But I have to ask you, Christopher. So we mentioned the Chicago White Sox. So let's dive in a little bit deeper there. Before we get into their 2024 season, how you became, first two-part question. Number one, how you became a Chicago White Sox fan. And then number two, just share one memory or story that stands out to you, whether it's attending a game live, whether it's watching with somebody, whether it's a moment from a game. Obviously as a Mets fan, we have the 86 World Series. We covet that because we may not get another championship again. So yourself, let me ask that question. What would your answer be to that?
Well, I love the White Sox. And I mean, my father grew up on the south side of Chicago, 63rd and Cottage Grove Avenue in Hyde Park. My grandfather that I mentioned had the diner. When he came from Cyprus, came from a Greek family and on both sides. And his job, he was a math teacher at the University of Chicago. When the Depression hit, he ended up opening the diner. But my grandfather used to, I lost him young, but he used to always talk about the White Sox as his boys. He always talked about his boys. And I love that. I was born a mile from Wrigley Field. I grew up 2 miles north, and I'm not a Cub hater. I in 2016, I absolutely rooted for the Cubs. I wasn't going to root for Cleveland. I couldn't do that. And a lot of White Sox fans would get irritated with that, and I really don't care. But I was you root for who your father roots for, right? Or if your mom's the big baseball fan, that's who you root for. We went to White Sox games at real Comiskey Park all summer long. We used to sit out in the bleachers. We would sit in the upper deck in left field or right field. Sometimes we'd get lucky enough to get behind home plate. But I mean, I was a fan back in the days of Louis Aparicio, Wilbur Wood, Bill Melton, Dick Allen, and so on. Favorite memories. I mean, there's just, we used to love going to the twilight doubleheaders because after the doubleheader, there was always the fireworks show. And not just the exploding scoreboard in center field, but you had the fireworks show. But great memories for me. There's two that stick out. One, the last game in original Comiskey Park, I was in the first row of the upper deck in right field. And I tell you guys, I didn't want to leave because I grew up in that park. I get chills thinking about it. I grew up in that park and I grew up in Chicago Stadium, the old Madhouse on Madison. And those were so much a part of my childhood. So the Sox that day, they played Seattle. They won that game, and the big park across the street was rising. And the other memory that sticks out was the night that I was in the upper deck in deep left field. This upper deck's at guaranteed rate field. Some ridiculous name, but they don't go past the foul pole. But I was there the night that the White Sox clinched in 2005. And I clinched being in the playoffs. And I had tears in my eyes. I was so happy. I never thought I was going to see that again. And when they won the World Series that year, they went 11-1 in the playoffs. The only loss was at home to the Angels. They swept the Red Sox. They beat the Angels in 5, and they swept the Astros when they're still in the National League. My first call was to my late dad. My first call because him and I shared such a great father-son bond of the White Sox, and it had to be my first call. So those would be the two memories that stand out. And the other would be the time that Dick Allen in Old Comiskey hit a shot that went up, over, bounced off the roof, and went out of the park. And in Old Comiskey, that's a shot. That was a shot. So those are the memories that pop out with the White Sox.
Yeah, that's not an easy task. I remember playing some old school video games, and you'd play in some of the older stadiums and things like that, and to see how much further back some of the walls would be, and it's just amazing to see how a blast go that far.
Forgive my interruption. As long as you made that point, Mike, let me add to that. The reason the White Sox fans hated the new park, by and large, is that the first row of the upper deck at guaranteed rate field is where the last row of the upper deck was in Comiskey Park. So when they built the new park, they've redone the upper deck. They took 10 rows off. They literally rebuilt the whole thing because people didn't like the angle. I didn't have any problems with the angle. The angle is sharp when you go to Yankee Stadium. I've been in the upper deck, the fifth deck at Dodger Stadium. You're way up there. But White Sox fans weren't used to that. They were used to Comiskey and the intimacy. So that the difference in overall ambiance and seating at guaranteed rate field, they've done a lot of nice things to it, but really the park got outdated a year later when Camden Yards opened up.
So you weren't there for Disco Demolition Night?
No, but one of the great inspirations for me was Steve Dahl to get into radio. Of course, he started that whole thing. Who will ever forget Disco Demolition Night in 75, I think it was? Just, my gosh. I don't think anybody ever thought that night was going to happen that way. I work with some people at KMJ Radio here, a couple of younger folks that had never heard of it. So I just basically rolled tape. I rolled the video, and they were just, their eyes were like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yep.
Yeah. So
between that and 10-cent beer night, those two are legends.
And taking the shower in center field, just pull the cord.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
And also we kind of have that in common because the ownership group of the St. Paul Saints is the son of the former owner of the White Sox. So
yeah,
they knew how to put on a party. They know promotions. They knew what they're doing.
Mike Beck.
Yep.
Yeah. But because I remember seeing the St. Paul Saints when they used to be in Midway Stadium, right near, which is right near the Minnesota State Fairgrounds, and then they built that glorious. It's not new anymore, but what a gorgeous park down by the river.
Yep. And so I've got to ask. So Tony, I want to ask you this question specifically. So we know, and my apologies, Christopher, in advance. We have to rehash. 41 wins, 121 losses. Okay, it is what it is. We should not say it can get any worse. Like, But what I want to ask you, Tony, is as a fan of, obviously we know that you're a Minnesota Twins fan. So, But so you're looking at this, you're looking at the schedule, what games you're going to attend and all that sort of thing. While you're in Minnesota, do you prefer, if you get a select amount of games to go do you prefer a game against a team like the White Sox that's struggling so bad offensively and every which way? Do you prefer that to hope to see a little bit more scoring, that sort of thing? Do you prefer, seeing that division rival, that powerhouse, that juggernaut like the Yankees, or what is your preference, or do you even have one? Do you just go if the day's right, you go, or do you have a preference for something like that? Because I always wondered that.
I'm probably going to relate with Christopher. This year has been, like you said, a dumpster fire for the White Sox. But the thing that comes with that is really good ticket prices. You know that you're going to be able to get in the door. I mean, a hot dog might cost more than a ticket. So you know that you can get in there cheap. Only thing you have to worry about is parking, food, and the rest. I mean, like you said, you get to see a division rival. There's been oil and water like relationship between the Twins and White Sox over the years. It's much better when both are very good, but I still prefer it over going to like a Yankees game, because that just gets out of hand, and usually there's more Yankees fans there. But I as much as I like it, I like the White Sox fans. I like the rivalry that we have, and keeping it in the Midwest.
Tony and I can relate and agree on this. We both can't stand the Yankees.
Yes.
It was very difficult as a Mets fan for
sure.
Yankees, Dodgers, World Series, and we'll get into the World Series here in a little bit too. Definitely difficult, because I found myself rooting for the Yankees, which I never ever wanted to do or admit. But there's just something about a team like the Dodgers, who did what they did, looked like an all-star team, did not even have Ohtani as a pitcher. Glasnow was out halfway through the season, which what else is new, but he's a great arm. And of course, they didn't have Kershaw. And it's a possibility that they can get Soto too. So it's almost unfair what they're doing. But we'll dive into there.
As long as you open that doorway, let me give you a brief counterpoint. Living out here, I got to tell you, Dodger Stadium is a magical place to go to. And I say this as somebody who didn't grow up a Dodgers fan. It's an absolutely glorious place to go to. You might not know this, Mike, but the man who was the architect who built Shea Stadium is the same architect who designed Dodger Stadium. And when you see the two stadiums, I mean, obviously Shea's not. I don't think Shea's not there anymore, right? They took it down. Right. Shea had to be built to accommodate the Jets as well. So you had that sort of strange semicircle design. Dodger Stadium, they got it right. I mean, right down to parking, where they terraced parking all the way up. So whatever level of seats you're in, you just walk right in. There's not a bad seat in Dodger Stadium. The food is fantastic. The crowds are great. I got to tell you, and plus we have family in Huntington Beach. So we had a good time going to Dodgers games, and we were all in on the Dodgers. And part of me, initially this summer, felt a little dirty, rooting for the Dodgers. But there's just, I'm sorry. I used to have the Sunday season ticket plan at Yankee Stadium, and I used to love to go there for that, just to root against them. So it was fun.
I also got on board the Dodger bandwagon. I was out there for Shohei's 40-40 game, and I actually was the one who hit off of my glove.
Oh, no!
So I was the guy I became a meme for a little bit because of that, but the way that the Dodger fans treated me, like you said, I've been there a few times before, and Dodger Stadium is just, it's so magical.
Hard to believe it's from 1962, right?
Right.
It's just hard to believe that when you think this place is, 62 years old, and it doesn't look like it. I mean, there's a little aging on the outside, but they've done a great job of preserving it, similar to preserving Fenway, preserving Wrigley. They've done a great job. They'll never move anywhere else. And at night when the sun sets, I mean, it's really amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've shared, I think, in the past too, but I live very close to Dodgertown in Vero Beach, Florida. And so it's just such a shame. I remember going there and you get Dodger dog for next to nothing. And, hot dog this big, the bun this big, of course. Yes. And I did enjoy that very much. I think my hate of the Dodgers is just out of respect. But it's just, you look at that lineup up and down and you can't help. Totally. You look at Ohtani going 2 for 19 in the World Series, and so many other people stepped up, especially Freddie Freeman, of course. Had the Kirk Gibson gut vibes going on there. But I want to, so let's go there next. But before we do, because Tony, we haven't and I'll start with you, Christopher, when we get there. But Tony, because we have some new audience since when we originally came on, I want to, if you wouldn't mind, I know you've told the story a few times, but if you wouldn't mind sharing the story of the infamous road trip that you took with the 2 games in the one day, because I still love hearing that each and every time.
Yeah. So that was, I think, 2022. I ended up, I planned it, probably had it in the works for about a decade, but planned it that year because it aligned. Did a game out in Fenway. It was the Boston Marathon game. So it started at about 11 a.m. Did 6.5 innings out in Boston, hopped on a plane, went out to LA, out to Dodger Stadium, and finished the night for 6.5 innings out in Dodger Stadium. So the best doubleheader, 2 of the most iconic stadiums, especially one on each coast. It was
wow.
I'll
cool.
never do anything like that again. It's I love it.
That is so cool. Wow. What a day. Wow.
Yeah, that's a day. And of course you have, the risk of like flight delays and things like that. But for it to work out, because you're right, you have to pan out perfectly, because if you do a 1 p.m. start, you're not going to make it. So that 11 a.m. start was key, that you plan that just right.
Did you land at LAX?
Yeah, and that was the only thing that was tough, was getting there. I mean, if it wouldn't have been LA, if it would have been any other city, we would have been there for the entire game. But we missed about 2.5 innings of play. But that was kind of to be expected. If the worst thing is traffic during that whole thing, we did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody who's been there knows, the easiest way to get to Dodger Stadium is to parachute in.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, the Dodgers fans always get criticized for coming late, and there is a little bit of that, but most of it is because of traffic. People simply can't get there.
Yep, and you saw it even with the parade. The team buses themselves were delayed.
Yes.
So if the team can't even get there, how are your fans going to get there?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So Christopher, this question's for you. So as we dive a little bit into the 2024 World Series, so before we get into the games themselves, we have to, you mentioned the Ohtani's 40th, the ball that hit off your glove. Just your initial thoughts, PG-13, of course, on the Yankee fan incident with the ball with Mookie Betts and whatnot, because then when you watch it back a third, fourth, fifth time, you realize the other guy grabbed his arm. It was a lot worse than the initial look that it was. So just your initial thoughts on that whole debacle that went down,
I think anytime fans and I've said this on my radio program many times, anytime that fans think that they're more important or they're some sort of relevant part of the game besides cheering, is wrong. They're just wrong. And I saw that somebody from ESPN, I don't remember the name, but I saw the interview and I read the interviewed these two guys, and they were bragging about this strategy that they had. And the one guy said, well, we consider it our job to patrol the wall. Hey, fellas, the Yankees have a pretty big payroll and a pretty talented team. And I'm quite sure that all of that team, starting with Aaron Boone right on down, they don't need your help. That could have really hurt Mookie. And it's any fans, the fact that it happened in Yankee Stadium, I don't want to just single Yankees fans out in Yankee, because I've seen that, my family lived in Philly 50 years. I've seen it happen in Old Veterans Stadium. I've seen it happen in Shea Stadium. I've seen it happen in Old Tiger Stadium. This kind of stuff isn't new. Of course, Bartman in Chicago trying to catch a ball. Well, that was a little bit different. Of course, he had to go underground the rest of his life. I think those two fans, if it's me, I'm glad. I love what the Yankees did in giving those tickets, pulling those tickets and giving it to the young boy who has been dealing with cancer. And it was him and his mom that were there. I think that was a beautiful gesture on the part of the Yankees. I mean, I would have loved to see, I don't know that Mookie knew that. I would have loved to see him hear that and maybe sign a ball for him and take it over to him or a bat. But if I'm the Yankees, I don't want those two clowns. I just don't want them on that wall anymore. I just don't. I don't know what they can do with it. Well, they can do whatever they want. It's their park. But shame on them for getting involved that way. Back away, move away, and let the ball players do what they are paid to do, and that is play the game.
Yep.
Yeah. And even if there was, go ahead.
If they want to be defensive, they have it in their own right that if the ball is coming over towards them, they can like you said, the Bartman incident, they can get in the way and try to interfere with it. That's totally acceptable because that's within the rules. But as soon as you start laying hands on a player, like you even said, what happens if roles were reversed? If it was a Yankees player that had that happen, they would be outraged. So
Yep.
let's be cool. Let's not interfere with the actual players themselves. And Christopher, you were 100% correct.
It reminds me a little bit, what you said. You're so right. When you start grabbing at a guy's glove, grabbing at a guy's wrist, it reminded me years ago at Madison Square Garden when there was a problem with the Rangers and the Bruins, and a couple of Bruins players went over the glass and went up the aisle, and one guy takes the fan's shoe off and starts beating him with his shoe. And listen, I don't care what the fans are doing. Similarly, don't go, if you're a player, do not go into the crowd. Nothing good, like I always tell my daughters, nothing good happens after midnight. Nothing good happens when you go into the crowd. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Tony. Don't grab a player. Don't touch him. Just stay away. You want to be defensive with do that.
Same with Ron Artest going into the stands. Like
same thing. Same thing. Yep.
And a lot of those of you that might be watching, I see Robertson here, a good friend of mine. Wrestling fans know all too well, especially to fans continuously hopping over. Now they do get lifetime bans. Once that happens, even one time, it's a permanent lifetime ban at all venues, all shows. But there was one incident. I don't know if you know too much about the wrestling world, but where Bret the Hitman Hart was at a Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and you had a guy just run right in the ring and tackle him down. And thankfully he wasn't injured and anything like that. But it happens. Yes, we see about the streakers and the people that run around the field until they get tackled. But too often, especially in professional wrestling, it's becoming an issue.
Mike, I'm in your brother's age neighborhood. So when you talk about wrestling, I mean, I go back to Pedro Morales and Chief Jay Strongbow, Mr. Fuji and Taro Tanaka, and back in the days when Vince McMahon was like 160 pounds and thin as a pencil. So I remember those days at the Philadelphia Arena where there'd be folding chairs set up, and it was the WWF before any of the recent last 20 years, the iterations of it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've just learned. I think I've missed one episode of Monday Night Raw since the 90s when it started. So diehard wrestling fan. But you mentioned Mr. Fuji. I found a fun fact that he worked as soon as he retired from professional wrestling. He instantly worked at the local movie theater as a ticket taker. He just wanted to be around the people, and he just enjoyed people, and just found that humorous. Yeah, so that was super cool.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, I forget where I saw that recently. It was on some sort of documentary or something. But yeah, so as we kind of sum up the World Series, and we talked the big moment, Game 1, the Freddie Freeman grand slam to end the game. I mean, you can't script that, and we kind of talked a little bit off air about the ridiculousness sometimes that is the question that the batter gets when they make said play. And I understand that's their job; they have to ask certain questions, but that moment was. I mean, that's a moment like we've talked about where you dream about as a child in your backyard. You're playing the game and whatnot. So of course that moment meant everything, and you're not going to really get an instant reaction that is of substance because he's still processing everything. But just Christopher, starting with you, and then Tony, just your that game, that moment set the tone for the entire series. I think if it wasn't for that moment, it might a little bit closer. But just the impact of that, or the significance of that moment for you.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. The way you framed it is it set the tone for the whole series. And I mean, I remember the Kirk Gibson shot, so many years earlier. Prior to the series on air, I had predicted the Dodgers in 5. I never imagined anything like what we saw in Game 1. It's easy to kind of look back now and say hindsight is 20/20, but I think we can look back and say that maybe put the Yankees a little more on their heels than at the moment we thought it would. I mean, you look at the way the teams were constructed, irrespective of how any fans think that, how much money is spent. And anybody who lived out here knew that Ohtani wasn't going anywhere. He loves where he lives in Newport Beach. He wasn't going to leave. He wasn't going to Seattle. He wasn't going down the road here to play for the Giants. They're kind of the modern day Steinbrenner team, right? I mean, there's no limit of money, but I do think when you combine their lineup with the amount of versatility they have in their lineup in terms of guys that can hit for power, guys that can hit for average, and guys that hit for both, and the level of excellence that they've had from their pitching, both as starters as well as the bullpen, that just had to give them so much juice. Obviously, it did. I know that when the Yankees came back in Game 4, I know there was a lot of talk of, maybe this is good. The Yankees are going to make history. And, when you think about it, what was it? 23 series had started 3-0. 20 of them ended in a sweep. 3 ended in 5. You can apply anything you do or don't want to numbers, but that's the World Series has been around for 100 plus, 120 years, whatever. And there's reasons that some numbers matter more than others. And I'll admit, Game 5, I didn't think when it was 5-0 Yankees, I absolutely did not think that was going to happen. And then that was an inning of nightmarish errors for the ages. The fact that Garrett Cole,
he turned into the White Sox.
Yes, they did. They channeled the White Sox. Yeah, they absolutely did. I think the play that channeled it most was Garrett Cole not going to first base. And the fact that after the game, they said, we practiced this 1,000 times, in spring training. He should have gone over there anyway. Hindsight is 20/20 again. But anyway, to bring it full circle, I think that first game, looking back on it now, it really did set a tone. And the way this thing rolled out, not really surprising. And really the Dodgers, they were, at least record-wise, they were the best team in baseball all year. They played that way. They had a 4 or 5 game losing streak, I think maybe back in late June or July. But by and large, they always managed to get themselves out of any really prolonged White Sox-like streak.
Yeah. And you mentioned, we'll talk just real quick about Aaron Judge. Like you talked about memes earlier, like, a lot of the, Aaron Judge going to be in Times Square for the ball drop. Of course, he just straight up didn't show up, unfortunately, for that series. He got a double towards the end when it didn't matter. But as a Mets fan, it was weird. That series was weird, right, with the Dodgers Mets, because it was, Dodgers won 4-2, but it felt like we were completely outmatched. Like there were, it was 10-0 how many different times, or 9-1, but the games that we did win were, we had offense onslaught, so it was night and day difference. So my question for you, Tony, if you can put yourself in the perspective of a fan of the team that's down 3-0 or that's losing some games, when we talk about bullpen assessment, right? So I know as a Mets fan, or my wife as a Tampa Bay Rays fan, you look at your bullpen, you understand guys make mistakes and stuff, but there's certain people that just get your blood boiling when you say, why are we going to this person in this moment, versus, okay, this guy I'm okay with, they usually get the job done or whatever. The joke with the Mets, there was Jose Butto, we call him 2-run Butto. Every single time he gets out there, he always gives up 2 runs. And so you're thinking in your head, like, why is he the guy? Like, is he seeing something that we're not seeing? Like, of course we're sitting there, he's making the big bucks, we're at home yelling at the clouds and the television screen. But so Tony, from your perspective, in terms of managing, you could apply it to the World Series, you can apply it to the White Sox or the Twins even. How do you feel the bullpens were managed in this postseason? Because I feel like some of the starters was well selected, but some of the bullpen decisions kind of made across the board really were head scratchers. Closers coming in way too early, things like that.
Yeah, I will get back to that. A couple things with what Christopher was saying. Mm-hmm. I think it's well known now that the Dodgers knew that the Yankees fundamentally weren't a good team. They came out and said they're full of stars, but they can't do the little things right. And I think after Game 1, when they lose it in heartbreaking fashion and they start to they're basically in the hole already, 1-0. It not only forces their hand, but when they're a bad fielding team, when they can't make those fundamental things, that only adds more pressure. And I think you saw that come out in the next few games, and especially, like you said, in Game 5, when things just basically unraveled. But as far as the bullpen, I was confused right away that the Dodgers, being so deep, had to go to a bullpen game. Usually you see teams go into a World Series, they have 3 starting pitchers and they ride with them. Obviously the Dodgers had injuries this year, but I just thought that was kind of a ballsy strategy, and I was really worried for them. I was like, you have all this momentum up 2-0. How's this going to go? But it worked out for them. But like you said, I think when it comes to the postseason in general, The quick leash is sometimes, more often than not, is a manager overthinking themselves. No one likes to go down in a game 3-0, but at the same time, if you're down 3-0 and then you add a guy that's cold and nervous coming in, you can snowball into 6-0. And you saw that a few times with both teams, that maybe going to the bullpen so quick wasn't the right move. But good thing for the Dodgers is that their bullpen was deeper. They knew how to use it. It seemed like the good news for them is when they lose, they can all, as a collective, the whole bullpen crumbles. But when they win, the bullpen is solid. So it's kind of an all or nothing deal. And I don't know, Christopher, is that something that you kind of saw?
Yeah, I did, and I'm forgive me, drawing a blank in what I thought was one of the key decisions. You mentioned managerial decisions and how fast you pull a guy, or do you let him go in and one more batter? There was that moment when Dave Roberts came out to the mound and he put his hands on was it Blake was it Trinan?
Yeah.
And you could see him. We didn't see what Roberts was asking him. He said it later, but he just wanted to see, can you do this? And looking in his eyes. And Roberts had so much confidence in him, and all the players had confidence in that moment. You could just I'm not a body language expert, but you got the sense of looking at all of them in that little powwow on the mound that the Dodgers were going to find a way through this, because I know we've all watched it. Everybody in your chat area, how many times have we watched our team where you wonder, why did he leave him in for one more batter? The fastball suddenly was going from 99 to 93, and you could just, Roberts made not all, but he made almost all the right moves throughout the playoffs. And I think that he was a key cog here. And it's not a knock on Aaron Boone by any means. By the way, you mentioned Aaron Judge. Of course, he's here in Fresno. He went to Fresno State. Mm-hmm. And he's from Linden up in the Bay Area. And there's a real dichotomy here in Fresno, because you have folks here. Most fans here are Giants fans. There's a lot of A's fans here. You have Dodgers fans, a few Angels fans, not a whole lot of Yankees fans, but everybody is an Aaron Judge fan. We've had a chance to have him on the program, and being the guy is about as nice a guy as you ever want to talk to. He's got his All Rise Foundation. He does great things for kids. But I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, when he got that home run, I thought maybe that's going to be the moment that really gets the Yankees going, but they just couldn't sustain it.
Yep. Yeah. And that's what's wild too, is that going back to the Dodgers, you said it correctly. They were the best team in baseball, but somehow I also thought that they underperformed a little bit, because there wasn't a 100-win team in the league this year. But at the same time, I think it was Dave Roberts should be commended, because in the past, they have gone all out. They've been the best team in baseball. They've won close to 110 games numerous times, but they always fall off in the playoffs. This felt like it was like load management almost going to basketball, where, you know what, let's run away with the division enough, but let's not keep our foot on the gas where we have nothing in the tank. And this was for all the crap that Dave Roberts gets, and he deserved it in the past. He played this so well this year that he should be commended.
I don't think it's a point that can be overstated. I think you really put that out there exactly right, because there is this notice that when you have a plethora of talent, you're just going to win. And it was basically added on by the fact you had Phil Jackson in Chicago winning the 6 titles in 8 years with all that talent, even though it was Jordan and the rest, but they had a lot of talent on that team. Then he goes to the Lakers. He had a ton of talent. Dave Roberts has had, as you just said, he had a lot of talent, but they never quite got there. So yeah, hats off to him, because he really, I think, did a tremendous job this year.
Yeah, he really did. And speaking of managerial, we got about 10 minutes left here. So wanted to ask you this, Christopher. Speaking of managerial, your thoughts on, getting back to the White Sox for just a minute, on Will Venable as the new manager of the season, as we segue there.
Well, I like the fact that he was the associate head coach, what you want to call him, that with Bruce Bochy, with Texas winning a World Series. He's been a bench coach. He was a special assistant with the Cubs. He's been a bench coach in Boston. He's been with some really good organizations. He's got some good experience. I don't know how much hands-on managerial experience he's had outside of what he was working with Bochy in Texas. If there's Jerry Reinsdorf, as your brother, as Darren would quickly attest, I can go on for an hour about Reinsdorf. I'm not a big fan of his. I think that it's a 50-50 thing with him, that he's loyal to a fault with the people that he hires, that he cares about. But that also works against him when you look at the people that he had in the organization before, with Hahn and Williams, and they were together 11 years and they went to the playoffs 2 times. That just doesn't work. He goes and hires Tony La Russa, which I thought was a terrible move. But I think also, to be fair, Reinsdorf it's just a piece of the failure of the White Sox organization. So I'm hoping that Venable comes in and he brings an energy that they haven't had. They haven't had any kind of energy really since Ozzie Guillen was manager. And people can say what they want about Ozzie, but guys played hard for him. They played hard. They gave everything they had, and he always had his players' backs in any situation. And I think the White Sox, I don't think that 05 team was the most talented in the history of baseball, but they had a great pitching staff, and guys stepped up to the plate, pardon the pun, and did what they had to do in the biggest moments. And a lot of that was Ozzie. I'm hoping that with Venable, I hope that some of that comes back. They have a big, long road ahead to reinvigorate or revivify this lineup and this minor league system. Both are just a disaster. White Sox average about 18,000 people a game. One of the things that excited me as a Sox fan is when they introduced renderings of a potential Chicago River Park. This is something that most of us as White Sox fans have wanted for years. Contrary to what a lot of Cubs fans think, there are White Sox fans.
Yep.
There are millions of White Sox fans. It's a Cubs town. It'll always town, just like New York is a Yankees town and LA is a Dodgers town. But if they build a ballpark, if they get off the south side and they put a park in the river, where they're talking about putting it is not far from what is now the Willis Tower, the Sears Tower. It's not far from Greektown. You would have water taxis going up the Chicago River. It would be a tremendous house cleaning of the entire organization, starting with that. And listen, the Cubs are smart. They market their team, their organization, their franchise to the entire Midwest. And that park is at least a third tourists every time they go in there, and more power to them. They do a great job. The White Sox have largely ignored that. White Sox marketing has been terrible. They could take lessons from your beloved Minnesota Twins, from your Mets. Reinsdorf has been stubborn. He listens to his inner circle. He doesn't really go outside. I mean, this is a guy that when they built the new park, and as I said, I was there for that, and he put in these blue seats. And Reinsdorf comes out and says, he was asked, why the blue seats? You've always had dark green seats. Why the blue? He wanted to honor his beloved Brooklyn Dodgers. This did not go over well in the city of Chicago because nobody cared about the Brooklyn Dodgers. Yeah, so, long story, long-winded answer short. I like the choice. He's got winning in his background. He wasn't a great player, but he was a decent player. He was a hard-nosed player. Listen, they can only go up, right?
Kind of going back to what I said about the Yankees being a team that sometimes channeled their inner White Sox. Fundamental baseball was not their strong skill. I see Will Venable as a guy who was very good at the fundamentals. He like you said, he wasn't an all-star, but he was a contributor on the team. He got into coaching, seemed like he was about the same type of dude where he was always a contributor. If he can even just make the change of making them a fundamentally sound baseball team, that right there, they'll get back to at least winning in the 60s of games. And that's 50% more. That's
yeah. Huge. You're right. I mean, this is a franchise that, they had Minnie Minoso and Luke Appling and Billy Pierce, Frank Thomas and Harold Baines, Jack McDowell. This is a franchise that has not been without great players, both in the field and on the mound. They've had some great managers over the years. They've had a lot of character with Comiskey Park and what have you, but they've never quite been able to put it together. The White Sox organization has always been more about the show than the actual playing. So maybe Will Venable comes in and sort of shifts the paradigm a little bit. And yeah, maybe they get into the 60s, and then in a couple of years, they're able to find their way to at least compete for a wild card at the outside.
Yep. And Mike, I got to ask you this, because it goes back to the ownership. Reinsdorf may be selling, also that new stadium potentially. We also know that the Rays are without a stadium. They want to keep it local, but what was tossed out is potentially actually playing at the site of the 87 and making a temporary stadium there, among other wild ideas. I mean, you also had the ties of, for a while in the 90s, maybe the White Sox were going to move down to Tampa. What do you see going forward for both franchises, I guess, Christopher and Mike? One, where are the Rays going to be? And two, is Reinsdorf real about selling? And I mean, that's two teams in the AL Central that are up for sale, maybe?
Yeah, I remember when they were talking about contraction with the Twins and the Montreal Expos, and that was a Bud Selig idea, and we don't have to get into that. I really believe Reinsdorf is a guy. It was a terrible idea, because the Twins have a great fan base, and I'm glad that they are right where they belong in the Twin Cities. The White Sox have a loyal fan base. They've not been given anything to cheer about for a long time. Reinsdorf is a guy, he's a great businessman, and he understands leverage. He went down to Nashville. He met with the mayor. A lot of my, I cover the Tennessee Vols, and a lot of my friends down there and media buddies really thought that he was about to move the team there. I don't think he has any desire to move the team there. I remember the St. Petersburg deal. They were literally 2 minutes to midnight in Springfield, the capital, before they got their money to keep the White Sox there. I had seen the uniforms, the green and orange, St. Petersburg, White Sox, all of that nonsense. So I do believe the fact that he's willing to sell, he's always said that it was going to go to his son. That's where the team was going to go. The fact that he's willing to sell, I would love to at least know that there would be a clause that will sell, but you've got to keep the team in Chicago. Because if they do that, they will get a group of investors that want to buy it and understand that this is one of the world's great cities, the third largest city in America, market 3 in media, and there is a lot to grasp there, but they need to have the right ownership.
And one of the oldest franchises in MLB.
Absolutely.
Yep. And from my side, living as close as I do to Tampa Bay, so obviously a lot of overreaction. You see the pictures, the damage looks terrible, of course, and they're going to have to find another place to play, of course. I mean, it's not playable. However, sometimes one thing that's a big misconception is the Tampa Bay fan base. Like, I understand where it is in attendance, right? I was recently, this past week, I was able to go on a cruise, had a fantastic time, Utopia of the Seas, beautiful ship, awesome experience. But a lot of it was on the news, was being portrayed as the ship's going to get rerouted. And I'll get to my point here just a second. The ship is going to be rerouted. There's a tropical storm here. It's going to turn into a hurricane. It's not safe. So we're going to go to Haiti instead. We're there. We're hearing what's on the news, but we're physically in the Bahamas. There's absolutely nothing going on. We're seeing the news reporting the hurricanes are hitting Bahamas that same day. It's like, no, but we're here in the location. So a lot of times my point is, with the Tampa Bay Rays, what's happened over these 5 years that they've been competitive outside of this year. They still were competitive. I just feel like they pulled the trigger too soon this year. But when you're there in Tampa, it's 80% Tampa Bay Rays fans, and 95% of the seats are being sold. Now, granted, they don't open the upper deck, but a lot of it's being portrayed on social media and things like that. It's just a poorly attended park, just like the Marlins, and nobody's going, and they're all fans of the other team. It's not the case, really. Like, there is a really big Tampa Bay fan base. However, where the location is and the way the stadium is currently before the storm, even, it's not ideal. Obviously, there is upgrades that need to be happen and whatnot. So I think where they're going to be, they're going to have to stay somewhat local, because they do want to be local to that fan base. There's a old stadium that hasn't been used in a little bit. They may go there. Some minor league teams, including Port Charlotte, have agreed to alter their already released minor league schedule. I think Orlando would be the place to go. Wide World of Sports, it's only an hour away. I think that would be my vote, not just selfishly, but that would draw the most interest and fan gauge interest. But I feel like they're going to somehow work out in either Port Charlotte or the Tampa Yankees minor league facility. I feel like those will be the top two. but I'm hoping it's Wide World of Sports. Now, what that's going to do for tickets, I was able to go to 4 games last season for $10 or $7 to sit, I think it was, in decent seats. So what that's going to do, I'm not sure, to the cost of a ticket, but I'd be willing to pay a little bit extra to go to Orlando for that experience.
And I've been to like 40 different stadiums, and one of them was down for the Blue Jays when they were playing in Dunedin. And I'm selfishly hoping that it's going to be a different stadium just so I can cross that off. And fingers crossed. I mean, it was interesting to see a major league game in a minor league ballpark, and I did the same up in Buffalo. It's going to be tough, but I'm glad that they're going to stay in the area. Plus, they have season ticket holders to appease, and you can't just move to Chicago for 40 games, because what are they going to do with that season ticket holder base?
I'll give you a quick parallel, fellas, because we cover the Oakland A's out here, and John Fisher is the absolute worst owner, perhaps in all of sports. He's absolutely sold out the Bay Area. You would see those crowds there, and he would like to project this idea that nobody cared about the A's. That couldn't be further from the truth. He sold fire sales of players. Anyway, they're going to Sacramento next year. They're going to play in the park that is for the Sacramento River Cats, AAA team for the San Francisco Giants. 4 years or 5 years down the road, he's now said he's going to put $1.3 billion of his own family's money into the new park down there, 33,000 seat dome stadium. Here's the rub. Carolyn Goodman is the mayor of Las Vegas. She's been on my show, and it's very telling when she came out and said, and I'm paraphrasing, we are excited for Major League Baseball to come to Las Vegas, and we will certainly support it if it's the A's. So I think there's some question still as to whether the A's are actually going to get out of Sacramento, because the Sacramento Kings owner is best friends with the A's. Vivek Stevie, I always mess up his last name. There's going to be pressure put on the A's to stay in Sacramento. I don't know that that's going to happen, but make no mistake, the old possession is 9/10 of the law. They're going to be there. They're going to put millions into that park to bring that River Cats park up to major league level. The travesty of the whole thing, fellas, is that the Howard Terminal plan that they had set up for the A's was glorious. It was going to be magnificent, but the bottom line is John Fisher didn't want to be there anymore. He wanted the same deal that Mark Davis got, and quite frankly, a lot of people don't know this, Las Vegas didn't want the Oakland Raiders either. They didn't want them either. They wanted to build a team the way the Golden Knights got built.
They want a winner. They don't want to be given a loser.
Right.
And especially a loser owner.
Right.
And like you said,
that's what he is.
3 to 4 years playing in Sacramento where guys don't want to play and they already have a thin roster. They're not going to suddenly move to Vegas and have an all-star roster. So that's 5 years behind the 8 ball already that they're going to be. And
keep your eyes on that one. That's going to be.
Don't get me started on him, but I definitely.
I'm with you. I've interviewed most of the people in the A's front office, but he's nowhere to be seen. The only time he wants to be seen is if it's a photo op that makes him look good.
And I'll have to get your information after the show too, but I really want to come out. I'm going to go to a game in Vegas or in Sacramento next year, and
we'll do it. A couple hours up the road for me. We'll make that happen.
Maybe we'll get to see a White Sox game out there, right?
That would be great. I mean, in fact, when that game happens, the White Sox are already losing 7-0. So
yes, and I love when you look at you mentioned that. We'll have our final question here as we go off, but you just segueing into when you look at the 2024 season for the White Sox as a whole, just some stats that stand out. You have Michael Soroka 0-10 with a 4.74 ERA. It's unbelievable what went wrong so quickly. They did have an all-star representative, contrary to the belief. Yes, a 41-win team was still able to get a representative on the roster. But my final question, I'll start, Tony, this part for you, and then final question, Christopher. So, Tony, since you've been to all the stadiums, where would you rate Guaranteed Rate Field on your list? And just one quick, probably the top and most negative thing about that stadium. And then Christopher, the follow-up or final question for you, a staple like we like to do on this podcast is come up with our Mount Rushmore for the team of discussion at this time, which is the White Sox. Okay. So Tony, I'll start with you. Quick, just synopsis, overview, those that have not been to Guaranteed Rate Field sounds like a terrible name. As a Mets fan, there was a year down here in Port St. Lucie, they actually called it Trash Depot Park. It was trash. It was terrible. Thankfully, that lasted all but 9 months. But your thoughts on Guarantee Rate Field?
Like you said, right off the bat, a negative thing about it is the name. It unfortunately is on, I would say, probably the bottom third in the league. It's for all of the history that the White Sox franchise has. I'm really disappointed that they do not showcase it more throughout the stadium. That's my biggest detraction, is that it just seems like a generic stadium that tried to represent the old type of feel, but just it added small things that if you're a true fan, you knew, like you said, the shower in center field, some of those things, which is great. But for highlighting it for any of the fans that are either new to the game or visiting, they don't showcase anything. The positive that I have is you're going to get a very affordable ticket. You're going to be able to enter the stadium for, especially early in the season, an April game. You want to be one of the brave few that goes down there, you can probably get a $5 ticket and be right behind the dugouts. And I like going early and catching baseballs. So you get the early entry down there, you get everything that you could want, and it's a cheap day at the ballpark.
Yep, exactly.
Let me just say, I concur with everything that Tony just said, because a lot of people don't know this, but HOK is the architectural firm in Kansas City, and they gave the original plans, what was the original looking Camden Yards, to Jerry Reinsdorf, and he said, "We've had a throwback park. We don't need another one. We're going to build a new one." The original plans don't look totally like what Camden Yards does look like, but it would have been better than what they built. And you're right, it's a very sterile, antiseptic looking park. They've added about 60, 70, 80 million into it. It's better than it was, but yeah, there's just no feeling like what they had. And I mean, the same designer that designed original Comiskey did Wrigley, and Wrigley's still there and Comiskey isn't. So
yep. And no, well said. And so before you give your final answers for our Mount Rushmore, you guys just had that brief conversation about you, Tony, going to Sacramento. So I wanted to pull that for you. So that would be early on, actually, April 25th, Friday through the 27th, 3-game series. Chicago is going to Sacramento this year, 25th, 26th, and 27th of April. So
we got to make that happen.
Yes.
Yep. So, okay. So now the big reveal, the Mount Rushmore, you can go at it. We're very flexible. It can be in your lifetime. It could be anyone you haven't seen. But
yeah,
who are your 4?
Yeah. For me, obviously, and I mentioned them earlier, guys like Billy Pierce, Nellie Fox, Luke Appling, Shoeless Joe, all these great players. I'm going to stick with people that I've seen because that would be the Christopher Gabriel Mount Rushmore. And for me, right there, you would put Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas would be on Mount Rushmore. You would have Harold Baines. I believe Harold Baines would definitely deserve to be there. I'm going to put Louis Aparicio on there. He was such a consistent fielder and just beloved in Chicago. And then I'm going to give you one that I think a lot of folks today maybe have never heard of, but he was a great pitcher. And to my knowledge, still the only pitcher to this day that has pitched both ends of a doubleheader, and that's Wilbur Wood. Wilbur Wood was a knuckleballer, and I think he won the first game, if I remember right, didn't win the second. I mean, there's other guys like Paul Konerko, Jim Thome, guys that kind of bounced in and out, Robin Ventura, Jack McDowell. But yeah, I mean, I think, Harold Baines, Frank Thomas, Louis Aparicio, and then Wilbur Wood. I got to get a picture up there. That would be my 4 for Mount Rushmore. And then the thing is, the fact that it's the White Sox Mount Rushmore, something would happen and the thing would crumble. It would fall apart, like lightning would hit it, and the whole thing would turn to sawdust.
Yeah, I think
I got to ask you, where does AJ Pierzynski rate? I know he's not going to be the top 4, but as far as catchers, maybe, does he make your Mount Rushmore?
I would put him there because you know what? He was such an important cog for the White Sox in that World Series. He was a lot of the character of that team. He was the heartbeat. Absolutely. He was. Before I forget, one quick thing about the White Sox Twins rivalry. One of the greatest things ever was when Hawk Harrelson was in the booth and Ken Herbeck was in the dugout. And here they are at Guaranteed Rate Field screaming at each other and basically offering each other to meet outside the park after the game. Now, Hawk was a tough guy. Herbeck would have killed him. But I wanted to be there for that because, quite frankly, that was better than anything the White Sox were doing on the field. But back to what you said, A.J. Pierzynski, he was such a character, but he could play. He could play. He called great games.
Yes.
And every White Sox pitcher would absolutely swear by him as a catcher. Carlton Fisk was wonderful. But, I mean, to me, Carlton Fisk will always be a Boston Red Sox.
Yep. And I think before we go to you mentioned it as a tease when we were talking before the show, but you didn't give the answer. You didn't tell it. So how did you get into this position? How did you get into calling for the White Sox and really getting into baseball? Because I know you said it had to do with Kirby Puckett.
Yes. So I was an intern at KFAN and then a new talk station in Minneapolis. These were iHeart stations. And I was screening for Pat Kessler. Kirby Puckett dies. And I suddenly, during the show, I get a note from our program director, and he said, "We need to see you in the office as soon as the show is over." And I thought, what have I done wrong? I'm going to get fired before I even get hired full time. They called me down there, and there's about 6 people in the office. And they said, "Here's the problem. Kirby Puckett has died. We have nobody at KFAN to go and do a story up there. We have nobody at KTLK to do a story. You're it." I had never done anything like that. I had done 105 plays as an actor. But I had never done anything like this. They gave me a digital recorder and they said, "Go up and just figure it out and file a report." So I went up there and I managed to get myself in the door, into the Twins offices, live on, at the time it was 100.3. Now KFAN is 100.3. I got a couple of folks from the Twins organization, came out front. I interviewed 3 or 4 fans, pulled out all kinds of numbers and stuff that I had brought with me to talk about Kirby Puckett, did an 8-minute report. And when I got back to the station about 2 weeks later, they gave me a weekend show. And they said, "You're ready. You're ready after doing that." And then I ended up taking on a much bigger role on Pat Kessler's show, which was 7 to 9 Monday through Friday. But it was, it was very sad, obviously, in the Twin Cities when Kirby passed. But there was literally nobody to go up to do that report. So they sent me, and it just happened to work out okay to meet the moment, as it were, because it could have been a disaster.
Yeah,
but thankfully it wasn't.
Especially someone that beloved in this area, like you said, it could have turned south. He also had his issues towards the end of his life.
He had a lot of issues.
You had to be delicate with that, but
forgive my interruption. My jumping off point was the fact that even though he was a Twins player, he was from my hometown.
Yep.
He was from Chicago. He was from the South Side, which is where my father came from, my father's side. And that was I remember Pat Kessler saying to me, "Make it personal, figure out something." And that was what I did. And that made it really easy. And I stayed away from all the other stuff because I thought, everybody knows that. And on a day that we have, the cities had lost one of their greatest athletes ever, we don't need to bring that into it because all of the writers of the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press in St. Paul, they were going to talk about that somewhere on the second page. I don't need to be the one to do it.
Yeah, and my childhood dog growing up, got her in 1993. Yes, it was a girl, but I still named her Kirby. So that's how deep Kirby ran.
Kirby Puckett, a lot of people don't remember. You would know this, and Mike, you probably know this. Every year, Kirby Puckett had a pool, like a billiards tournament. And I'm telling you, it didn't matter if it was a snowstorm. Athletes from all sports came in from all over the country.
Michael Jordan was always there.
Michael Jordan was always there. And I forget, it was his own foundation, I believe, that it benefited. But everybody came in, and he never sought advertising for it. Everybody knew about it, but people loved Kirby. And he had his problems. Nobody's perfect by any means. And certainly by no means am I marginalizing what went on with that. We all know what that was. Mm-hmm. But as far as the humanitarian, the philanthropist, and the on-field player, he was great.
Yep. Well, I cannot believe the time has flown by that much. This was awesome. Definitely look forward to again, in some capacity down the line. Again, those of you that jumped on later that are going to be watching this after, thank you, Christopher. Gabriel is with us. He's with KMJ Radio. Just go back and listen if you just jumped on, like I said. But if you can just share, where can anybody find you if they're looking for you besides there?
Yep, I'm on social media. I'm on X or Twitter. I'm at CG, the letters at CG Program, very easily at CG Program. Same thing on Instagram. I'm on Facebook too, but I spend most of my time on Instagram. You'll see, if you do follow me, you'll see that I do a lot of coverage of the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, because I have a long history with the University of Tennessee and the SEC, and I go down there and I host, and I'm a guest. But we talk baseball. We do. One thing about my social media profile, you're not going to see anybody being nasty or this and that. Other people can do that later for that. That's not my vibe. And my radio station, KMJ, AM 580 and 105.9 on the FM side, to me, how I comport myself on social media, I'm representing my colleagues, my coworkers, my bosses, my family. So I'll leave that other garbage to other people to do. So you can find me at CG Program. Would love to join. Love to hook up with you.
Awesome. I love hearing that. That is awesome. And again, Tony Voda at Baseball Road Tripper. Thank you so much for joining us. Just want to give our listeners another just thank you for this great journey to go by over 1,000 subscribers in 3 months.
Awesome.
Is awesome. And we'll continue to grow. We're going to hit the personal goal of 1,500 by the end of this year. I'm confident in that. Again, want to thank out to Natural Tax Solutions, Chris Bennett, great friend of the show. And just want to give listeners just a quick what's coming up ahead. We just released this evening Fear Reach Scream Park. My wife and I and our channel were invited out. This is in a small town in Tavares, Florida, and we got to experience their haunted attractions there. We got to go in and film inside the houses, which is normally not something that they do. So definitely check that out on the channel. It was just released right before we went live here. A week from tonight, we are going to be talking Cleveland Browns football. And then in 2 weeks from tonight, we have singer-songwriter Trent John. We met him on the Utopia of the Seas cruise that we were on. I'm very excited to have him on and just kind of pick his brain a little bit. So some great things to come. But again, thank you both, Tony and Christopher. I'm sure we'll hook up again sooner than later.
Let's hook up online.
Yes, definitely will. I'm sorry that Darren missed out on this one. So that's just every other reason to have a part 2.
Thank you, Darren. We miss you.
Yes. And thank you, Robert, for staying with us as well. Eileen and Brian for joining us, and a few others. And until next time, everybody, we'll see you around the ballpark. Okay, awesome. So cool. Thank you again, Tony. I appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. And just I know you wanted to hook up with him. If you didn't get his whatever, just message me. I'll send you